The palace fell silent, and a lone human guarded the queen. Part 1. The Posting. The empire was old, older than most species could remember. It stretched across 1,000 star systems, and its rulers had watched younger races rise and fall like waves on a shore. They themselves were tall, elegant creatures with hard shells that shone like polished metal. They had 4 arms, compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine, and minds that touched each other through a psychic web that connected their entire species. At the heart of this empire sat Queen the Undimmed. She had ruled for 300 years. Her carapace glowed with a soft golden light, a sign of her royal blood. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made others bow their heads in respect. She was not just a ruler. To her people, she was something close to a god. So when the Galactic Compact told her she must accept a human on her world, she considered it an insult. The Compact was a new thing, a peace agreement between dozens of species who had grown tired of war. One of its rules was simple: every sovereign world must accept a cultural liaison from humanity. The humans said it was about building bridges, about understanding. The Nuit was about power. The humans were spreading everywhere, and this was their way of putting eyes in every corner of the galaxy. But the Compact had teeth, and even they could not ignore it. So Queen agreed. She would accept one human, one small, soft, short-lived human to stand in her palace and pretend to matter. The human they sent was named Elias Vance. He arrived on a transport ship with no ceremony. No delegation met him. A single servant led him through the back passages of the palace to a small room near the servants' quarters. His title was Cultural Liaison, but everyone understood what he really was: a piece of political furniture, something to be tolerated and ignored. Elias was not young. Gray had crept into his dark hair, and lines marked his face around the eyes and mouth. He moved with a careful slowness that some might mistake for age, but was really something else. He was a man who had learned not to make sudden movements. His hands were rough with old scars. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they never stopped moving. He had been a soldier once. They did not know this. They had not bothered to read his file. On his first day, Elias was brought before the queen. The throne room was vast, with ceilings so high they disappeared into shadow. Thousands of nobles stood in perfect rows, their shells clicking softly as they shifted. The air smelled of something sweet and alien, like flowers that had never grown on earth. Queen looked down at the human from her throne. He was so small, so fragile. His skin was bare and soft, without any armor. His eyes had only 2 lenses instead of hundreds. He would live perhaps 80 years if he was lucky. She had gowns older than his entire species' time among the stars. "You are the human," she said. Her voice filled the room without effort. Elias bowed, not too deep, not too shallow, exactly as protocol demanded. "I am, Your Majesty. I thank you for accepting me into your court." His voice was quiet, calm. There was no fear in it, but no challenge either, just simple, plain words. The queen waved one of her 4 hands. "You will serve in the ceremonial guard. You will stand and watch. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not interfere with the workings of this court. Is this understood?" "Understood, Your Majesty." And that was it. The audience lasted less than 2 minutes. Elias was led away to begin his duties, and the court returned to its business. Within a week, most of them had forgotten he existed. This was exactly what Elias wanted. He stood at his post every day at the far end of the throne room. He wore a simple uniform, dark and plain. He carried no weapons that anyone could see. He did not speak. He did not move except when required. To the nobles who passed him, he was invisible, just another piece of the scenery. But Elias was not idle. He was watching. He watched the nobles and learned their names, their families, their alliances. He watched the servants and learned their routes, their schedules, their habits. He watched the guards and memorized their rotations, their weapons, their weaknesses. He walked the palace in his free hours, exploring every corridor, every forgotten room, every passage that the maps did not show. He learned the language, not just the words but the subtle clicks and harmonic tones that carried meaning beneath meaning. He learned their customs, their rituals, their history. He read everything he could find in their archives, including old architectural plans that had not been touched in centuries. He filed no reports to his superiors. He told no one what he was doing. When other humans asked how his posting was going, he said it was quiet, boring, nothing to report. He was lying. 3 months into his posting, Elias had mapped the entire palace in his mind. He knew 17 ways to reach the queen's chambers. He knew which nobles hated each other and which were secretly allied. He knew that 3 of the queen's advisors had changed their schedules recently, arriving early and leaving late. He knew that the queen's brother, Prince, had doubled his personal guard without explanation. He knew that 4 new workers had joined the kitchen staff, and none of them had proper documentation. He knew something was wrong. But he said nothing, not yet. He had no proof, only patterns. Only the instinct that had kept him alive through 3 wars and a dozen black operations that officially never happened. He continued to stand at his post, invisible and ignored, watching everything. The queen began to notice something strange about the human. Not his presence, which was easy to overlook, but his quality of attention. In a court full of people who wanted things from her, who flattered and schemed and begged, here was a creature who seemed to want nothing at all. He simply watched, waited, like a stone in a river, letting everything flow around him. It made her curious, and curiosity was dangerous for someone like her. She had lived 300 years by being careful, by trusting no one completely. But there was something about the human stillness that she could not quite ignore. She decided she would speak to him again, privately, just to understand what he was. She did not know that this decision would save her life. Outside the palace, in the dark spaces between stars, ships were moving. Messages were being sent through channels that no one monitored. Weapons were being prepared. And a prince was counting down the days until his sister would be dead and her throne would be his. The palace was quiet. But the silence before a storm is always the most dangerous kind. The palace fell silent, and a lone human guarded the queen. Part 2. The Silence Before. The summons came at midnight. Elias was in his small room, sitting on the edge of his bed, cleaning a knife that he was not supposed to have. The blade was simple, without decoration, made of a ceramic compound that would not show up on most scanners. He had carried it through 3 postings and never needed to use it, but he always kept it sharp. A servant appeared at his door, a young with a pale blue shell and nervous eyes. "The queen wishes to see you, alone, now." Elias put the knife away and followed. The private audience chamber was small by standards, which meant it was still larger than most human homes. Soft light came from panels in the walls. The air was warm and carried the scent of something like cinnamon. Queen stood near a window, looking out at the 3 moons that hung in the sky. She did not turn when he entered, closed the door. He did, then he stood in silence, waiting. "You are a strange creature, human." Her voice was softer here, without the harmonic power she used in public. "My court is full of those who seek my favor. They bring gifts, they make speeches. They bow until their shells crack, but you do none of these things, you simply watch." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Why?" Elias considered the question carefully. In his experience, rulers did not like complicated answers. But this ruler was different. He could see it in the way she held herself, in the tiredness around her compound eyes. She was asking because she truly wanted to know. "I was sent to protect cultural exchange," he said. "But I find that I cannot stop noticing things. It is an old habit, a bad one perhaps." The queen turned to face him. The golden light of her carapace made shadows dance across the walls. "What things do you notice?" "Patterns, changes, small things that most people would not see." He paused. This was the moment. He could stay silent and keep his position, or he could speak and risk everything. He had been a soldier for 30 years. He knew when to follow orders and when to trust his instincts. His instincts were screaming. 3 of your advisors have changed their schedules in the past 2 weeks, he said. They arrive before dawn and leave after midnight. They meet in a chamber in the East Wing that is not on the official schedule. The Queen's eyes narrowed. All 1,200 lenses focused on him with sudden intensity. Your brother, Prince, has doubled his personal guard. The new guards are not from the regular army. They wear the uniforms, but they move differently. They have training that your standard soldiers do not. He continued, his voice calm and steady. 4 new workers joined your kitchen staff last month. I checked their documentation. It is good, but not perfect. The paper is correct, but the ink is too fresh. Someone created those documents recently. You presume much, human. The Queen's voice had grown cold. You presume to tell me of threats in my own palace, in an empire I have ruled for 3 centuries. I presume nothing, Your Majesty. I only answer what you asked. The silence stretched between them. Elias could hear his own heartbeat, slow and steady. He had faced death many times. This moment did not feel like death. It felt like a test. Finally, the Queen spoke. Leave me. Do not speak of this to anyone. Elias bowed and left. That night, Queen summoned her spymaster. Lord was old even by standards. His shell faded to a dull gray. He had served her family for 500 years. If anyone would know about threats to her life, it was him. I have heard rumors of conspiracy, she said. I want you to investigate my brother's activities, his new guards, the changes in my court. Lord bowed deeply. Of course, Your Majesty, I will look into it immediately. 3 days later, he returned with his report. He had found nothing, no evidence of conspiracy, no unusual activities. Prince was simply being cautious, as any royal should be. The new kitchen workers were legitimate. The advisors were meeting to plan a surprise celebration for the Queen's 300th anniversary on the throne. There is nothing to fear, Your Majesty, Lord assured her. The human is seeing shadows where there are none. Humans are known for their paranoia. It is how they survived on their dangerous world. The Queen dismissed him. She sat alone in her chamber for a long time thinking. Either Elias was wrong, or her spymaster was lying. Lord had served her family for 5 centuries. He had been loyal to her father and his father before him. She had trusted him her entire life. But the human had no reason to lie. He had nothing to gain and everything to lose by speaking. And his eyes, those strange gray eyes, had held no deception, only certainty. She did not sleep that night or the next. Elias noticed the change in her. The Queen moved differently now. She was careful in ways she had not been before. She watched her advisors with new attention. She kept her brother at a distance. She said nothing to Elias, did not acknowledge him in any way, but he understood. She was listening, she was afraid. Good, he thought, fear keeps people alive. He increased his own vigilance. He walked the palace at night, moving through the old passages that he had discovered in the archives. He watched the new guards, memorizing their faces, their habits, their weapons. He made a map in his mind of every exit, every hiding place, every route that could be used for escape or attack. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The festival of 12 moons approached, a holy night when the 3 moons aligned with 9 other celestial bodies. It was the most sacred night in the calendar. The Queen would perform ancient rituals in the Sanctum of Echoes, alone, as her ancestors had done for thousands of years. Elias did not like it. The Queen would be isolated, separated from her guards, in a fixed location for several hours. It was the perfect time for an attack. He requested an audience. The request was. He tried to send a message to the Queen through official channels. The message was blocked. He went to the commander of the Royal Guard. The commander laughed at him. A human, warning us about security. Know your place, liaison. The festival has been celebrated for 10,000 years. Nothing has ever gone wrong and nothing will go wrong now. Elias returned to his quarters. He sat on his bed and cleaned his knife and thought about what he should do. He was not part of this empire. They had made it clear that he was nothing to them. If something happened to the queen, he could leave, go home, file a report about how they had refused to listen and let their ruler die. No one would blame him. But he thought about the queen, the way she had spoken to him, not as a lesser creature, but as a person. The way she had listened to his warning, even though it came from a species she had been taught to despise. The way she had been afraid, not for herself, but for her people. He had served many leaders in his life, generals and politicians, kings and presidents. Most of them had been interested only in their own power, their own survival. They would have dismissed his warning because it came from someone beneath them. The queen had listened. That meant something. He was not sure what, but it meant something. The night of 12 moons arrived. Elias stood at his post in the throne room as the sun set and the moons rose. He watched the queen enter the sanctum of echoes. He watched the great doors close behind her. Then the lights went out, and the screaming began. The palace fell silent, and a lone human guarded the queen. Part 3. When the lights died. The darkness was absolute. Not just the lights, but the psychic web that connected every mind had gone silent. For a species that had never known true mental isolation, it was like suddenly going blind and deaf at the same time. The screaming filled the throne room. Nobles who had never experienced a moment without the comforting hum of other minds now felt utterly alone. They stumbled into each other, their compound eyes useless in the pure blackness. Guards shouted orders that no one could hear through the chaos. Elias stood perfectly still. His eyes were adapting to the dark. Humans were not made for true darkness, but they could function in it better than creatures who had never needed to. He had trained for this, years ago, in places where light was a luxury. He breathed slowly and let his other senses take over. He heard the sound of weapons being drawn. Not the panicked movements of guards trying to restore order, but the practiced, quiet sounds of soldiers who knew exactly what they were doing. He heard bodies falling, the wet sound of blades entering flesh, the soft gasps of people dying before they could scream. The royal guard was being slaughtered, and half of them were doing the killing. Elias moved. He slipped through the chaos like water through stones, using the screaming nobles as cover. A guard swung a blade at him in the darkness, but the guard was, and eyes needed at least some light to function. Elias ducked under the swing, drove his ceramic knife up into the soft joint between the guard's chest plates, and caught the body before it hit the ground. He took the guard's weapon, a short blade that hummed with some kind of energy field. It was heavier than he liked, but it would work. The throne room was a massacre. Elias could hear the traitors calling to each other, coordinating their attacks through hand signals and clicks that they had practiced for this moment. They were professionals. This was not some rushed coup attempt. This had been planned for years. He thought of the queen, alone in the sanctum of echoes. The doors were sealed. She was supposed to be safe. But if the traitors had planned this carefully, they would have a way in. He had to reach her. The main corridors would be full of enemies, but Elias had spent 3 months learning every hidden path in this palace. He knew about the old servant passages that had been sealed centuries ago. He knew about the maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the foundations. He knew about a forgotten entrance to the sanctum that appeared on architectural plans from 2,000 years ago, but had been removed from all modern maps. He moved through the darkness, navigating by memory and touch. Behind him, the sounds of fighting faded. Ahead, silence. The maintenance tunnels were cramped but comfortable for a human. Elias crawled through dust that had not been disturbed in generations, past old machinery that had stopped working before humanity discovered fire. His hands found the wall he was looking for, and he pushed on the stone in the pattern that the old plans had described. A section of wall slid aside, revealing a narrow passage. He emerged into a small chamber behind the sanctum. Through a crack in the ancient stones, he could see into the sacred space. Queen stood in the center of the room, her golden carapace the only source of light. She was not performing the ritual. She was standing very still, her forearms raised slightly, her compound eyes scanning the darkness. She knew something was wrong. Through the dying echoes of the psychic web, she had felt her guards die. She had felt the minds of her subjects fill with terror and then go silent, one by one. She was alone, and she knew that someone was coming to kill her. The main doors to the sanctum shuddered. Someone was working on the locks from the outside. They would be through in minutes. Elias pushed through the hidden entrance and stepped into the sacred space. The queen spun toward him, her claws raised to strike. Then she stopped. Even in the dim light of her own body, she recognized the small, soft shape of the human. She breathed. "Majesty, we need to move." "How did you get in here? The passages are sealed, the guards." "Your guards are dead, most of them. The ones who aren't are the ones who killed them." He moved toward her, his movements urgent but not panicked. "The psychic disruptors will keep working for at least another hour. Your brother has planned this for a long time. He has people in every part of the palace. If we stay here, we die." "The disruptors," the queen's voice was hollow. "That is why I cannot feel anything. I thought I was dying." "You're not dying, not yet, but we need to go now." The pounding on the doors grew louder. Elias could hear voices, muffled but clear enough. They were almost through. He held out his hand, a human gesture, simple, direct, the kind of gesture that did not use because they communicated through touch in different ways. "Trust me," he said. Queen had ruled for 300 years. She had survived assassination attempts, political conspiracies, and 2 civil wars. She had learned never to trust anyone completely. Trust was weakness. Trust was death. But she was alone in a way she had never been alone before. The web that had connected her to her people since birth was gone. The guards she had relied on had betrayed her. The advisors she had trusted were either dead or part of the conspiracy. Everything she had built her life upon had crumbled in a single night. And here was this human, this small, fragile creature who should not have been able to reach her, who had nothing to gain from helping her, who was looking at her with those strange gray eyes that held no deception. She took his hand. His skin was warm, soft, so different from the hard shells of her own kind. But his grip was firm, and when he pulled her toward the hidden passage, she followed. They crawled through the ancient tunnels. The queen's carapace scraped against the stone, leaving golden dust behind them. Elias led her through turns and junctions that she had never known existed, moving with the certainty of someone who had memorized every path. Behind them, she heard the sanctum doors crash open. She heard the shouts of confusion when the assassins found it empty. She heard them begin to search. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "The old water systems," Elias replied. "They run under the entire palace. Your brother's people don't know about them. The plans were archived 3,000 years ago, and no one bothered to look." "How do you know about them?" "I read a lot." They emerged into a larger tunnel, one that had once carried water to the palace fountains. It was dry now, the water rerouted centuries ago to newer systems. Elias paused, listening. Then he moved again, pulling the queen along. "There is a communication array in the eastern tower," he said. "If we can reach it, you can broadcast to your empire. Tell them you're alive. Tell them what your brother has done." The eastern tower is across the entire palace, through hundreds of rooms, past thousands of guards. Most of the guards are fighting each other or looking for you in the wrong places, and I know a path they don't. The queen looked at this human, this creature who should have meant nothing to her, and she felt something she had not felt in 300 years. Hope. "Then lead the way, Elias Vance," she said, "and let us see what a human can do." The palace fell silent, and a lone human guarded the queen. Part 4: The Long Night. The next 8 hours were the longest of Queen's life. She had witnessed battles. She had seen the aftermath of wars. But she had never been hunted like an animal through her own home, crawling through spaces that no queen had ever seen, hiding from servants who had smiled at her that very morning. Elias moved like a ghost. There was no other word for it. He seemed to know where every enemy was before they appeared. He would stop suddenly, press her against a wall, and moments later a patrol would pass by so close that she could hear them breathing. He navigated in near-total darkness, using his hands on the walls, counting his steps, remembering every turn from maps he had studied months ago. The first time they encountered enemies directly, the queen learned something about humans that her people had never understood. 3 guards stood at a junction ahead. There was no way around them. Elias held up one hand, signaling her to wait. Then he moved forward, silent as shadow. The first guard died without a sound. Elias came up behind him, one hand over his mouth, a blade across his throat. The body slumped and Elias caught it, lowering it gently to the ground. The second guard turned at some small noise. Elias was already there, driving his knife up under the chin into the brain. The third guard had time to raise his weapon. He did not have time to use it. Elias stood over 3 bodies, breathing slowly. There was blood on his hands, on his uniform. His face showed nothing. The queen stared at him. She had seen warriors fight. They fought with ritual and honor, announcing themselves, giving their enemies a chance to surrender. It was the civilized way, the ancient way. This human had killed 3 of her kind in less than 10 seconds, and none of them had ever seen his face. "Come," Elias said, "we need to keep moving." They moved. The palace was chaos. Loyal guards were fighting traitors, but in the darkness and confusion, it was hard to tell who was who. Fires had started in several places. The queen could smell smoke drifting through the corridors. Somewhere, someone was screaming orders, but no one was listening. Elias led her through servants' passages, through storage rooms, through an ancient temple that had been sealed since her grandmother's time. Twice more they encountered enemies. Twice more Elias killed them. He did not hesitate. He did not show mercy. He did what was necessary and moved on. "You have done this before," the queen said during a brief rest. They were hiding in a forgotten gallery, surrounded by statues of ancient rulers. "Killed like this, many times." "Yes." Elias checked his weapons. He had collected 3 more knives and a short sword from fallen enemies. "I was a soldier, and then I was something else, something my government does not talk about." "What were you?" He looked at her. In the faint glow of her carapace, his face was hard to read. "I was the person they sent when things needed to be done quietly, when there could be no witnesses, no records, no questions." He paused. "I am not proud of everything I have done, Majesty, but tonight I am glad I learned how to do it." They continued. Near the Hall of Ancestors, they ran into a squad of soldiers actively searching for the queen. There were too many to kill quietly. Elias pulled her into a side chamber and closed the door. "They will find us," the queen whispered. "There is no other exit." Elias was looking at the room. It was full of old tapestries, ancient artifacts, ceremonial items that dated back to the founding of the empire. Priceless, irreplaceable. He picked up a ceremonial torch that still held old fuel and lit it with a device from his pocket. "What are you doing?" He did not answer. He threw the torch onto a pile of ancient tapestries. They caught fire immediately, flames racing up the fabric, spreading to the wooden displays. "No," the queen reached toward the fire, then stopped. The heat was already intense. "Those are the relics of my ancestors, treasures that have survived 10,000 years." "Your ancestors are dead, Majesty." Elias grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a small window. "You're not yet." The fire spread fast. Smoke poured into the corridor, and they heard shouts of alarm. The soldiers who had been searching for them ran toward the blaze, calling for water, for help. In the confusion, Elias and the Queen slipped away through a ventilation shaft that opened into the next wing. The Queen did not speak for a long time after that. The loss of the relics was a wound that would not heal quickly, but she was alive, and she was beginning to understand what that cost. They reached the eastern tower as dawn began to lighten the sky. The communication array was at the top, guarded by a dozen soldiers loyal to the prince. Elias studied them from a hiding spot, counting weapons, noting positions. "Too many," the Queen said, "even for you." Probably. Elias was checking the charge on an energy pistol he had taken from a dead officer. "But we don't have a choice. Can you use a weapon?" "I am a queen, not a warrior." "Queens can learn." He handed her a knife. "If anyone gets past me, use this. Aim for the joints between the shell plates. That's where they're soft." "Elias," she said his name for the first time. "If we fail here, my brother wins. He will kill everyone who was loyal to me. He will rule with fear and blood. I cannot let that happen." "Then we won't fail." He stood up and walked toward the soldiers. Not running, not hiding, just walking like a man taking a morning stroll. The soldiers saw him and raised their weapons. They shouted for him to stop, to surrender. He kept walking. He raised his pistol and started firing. The first 3 soldiers fell before anyone could react. Then Elias was among them, too close for their long weapons to be useful. He moved between them, knife in one hand, pistol in the other, striking and shooting and moving, never stopping, never slowing. A blade caught him across the ribs. He ignored it and killed the soldier who had struck him. An energy bolt burned through his shoulder. He stumbled, kept moving, shot the attacker through the eye. More wounds, more blood, more death. When it was over, 12 soldiers lay on the ground and Elias was still standing. Barely. Blood soaked his uniform, human blood, red and strange against the blue of blood that covered everything else. "The array," he gasped. "Go now." The Queen ran past him and began activating the communication systems. Her claws moved across the controls with desperate speed. Behind her, she heard Elias fall to his knees, then catch himself against the wall. The array hummed to life. The Queen opened a channel to every ship, every station, every world in her empire. "This is Queen the Undimmed. I am alive. My brother has attempted to take my throne through murder and treachery. All loyal subjects are commanded to reject his claim. All military forces are ordered to secure the palace and arrest the traitors. Your queen lives and your queen commands you. Fight." The message went out. Across the empire, ships began to move. Officers who had been uncertain chose sides. The tide began to turn. In the doorway, more soldiers appeared. The last of the prince's guards come to stop the broadcast. They saw the Queen at the array. They saw the human bleeding on the floor. They raised their weapons. Elias raised his pistol. His hand was shaking. His vision was blurring. But he had one shot left, and he put it through the chest of the lead soldier. The others charged. The Queen stepped in front of Elias. She had no weapon, no training, nothing but her claws and 300 years of refusing to bow to anyone. The first soldier to reach her found out that even a queen could kill when she had something to protect. They held the doorway together, the ancient ruler and the dying human, until the sound of fighting below them changed. Until loyal guards came crashing up the stairs. Until the sun rose over a palace that was broken but not fallen. The Queen caught Elias as he finally collapsed. His blood, so different from her own, stained her golden carapace. "You saved me," she said. "Just doing my job," he whispered. And then he was unconscious, and she was shouting for medics, and the longest night of her life was finally over. The palace fell silent, and a lone human guarded the Queen. Part 5: What Remains. Prince was captured 3 days later, trying to flee to a ship in the outer system. His trial was brief. His execution was public. The queen watched without expression as her brother's life ended, and if she felt grief or satisfaction or anything at all, she kept it hidden behind her golden shell. The conspiracy ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Lord, the spymaster who had served her family for 5 centuries, confessed to everything. He had been planning this for decades, angry over some ancient slight that no one else remembered. Half the royal guard had been turned. A third of the court had known and stayed silent. The queen had them all arrested. Some were executed. Some were exiled. Some were given the chance to prove their loyalty again, though they would never be fully trusted. The palace, which had stood for 10,000 years, began the slow process of healing. Elias Vance spent 2 months in a medical bay. Human-compatible facilities did not exist on the. They had to be built. Surgeons who had never worked on human flesh studied day and night to learn how to save him. Medicines were synthesized. Equipment was modified. Everything that could be done was done. The queen ordered it all. She visited every day. She would sit beside his bed while he slept, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. His skin was pale, almost gray, covered in bandages and tubes. The machines around him beeped and hummed in rhythms she did not understand. He looked so fragile, so close to death. But he kept breathing. Day after day, he kept breathing. Humans are stubborn, the doctors told her. They do not give up easily. She was beginning to understand that. When Elias finally opened his eyes, the queen was there. She had been reading reports on her tablet, dealing with the endless work of rebuilding an empire. But she set it aside the moment she saw him move. "Welcome back," she said. Elias blinked, orienting himself. The room was bright, clean, full of equipment he did not recognize. He could feel the ache of wounds that had not fully healed, the weakness of muscles that had not moved in too long. But he was alive. "How long?" His voice was rough, barely a whisper. 63 days. You almost died several times. My doctors are quite proud of themselves for keeping you alive." He tried to sit up and failed. The queen pressed a control that raised the bed slightly, helping him see the room better. "Your brother, dead, along with everyone who helped him. The Empire, stable. Your broadcast saved many lives. The Loyalist forces were able to coordinate because of you." Elias closed his eyes. Good. The queen was quiet for a moment. She had rehearsed this conversation many times in her head during the long days of waiting. She had prepared speeches, formal words of gratitude, offers of reward and honor. But now that he was awake, all of those words seemed wrong. "My people are calling you the shadow of the queen," she said instead. "There are songs about you, stories. In 60 days, you have become a legend that will last for generations." Elias made a sound that might have been a laugh. "I was just doing my job, Majesty." "No," her voice was firm. "Your job was cultural liaison. You chose to do something else. You chose to notice things that did not concern you. You chose to warn me when no one else would. You chose to stay when you could have fled." She paused. "Why?" Elias was quiet for a long time. The machines beeped around them, marking the seconds. "When I arrived here," he finally said, "I expected to be ignored, maybe humiliated. Your people made it very clear that humans were nothing to you. I thought I would spend a year standing in corners, filing empty reports, and then go home." He turned his head to look at her directly. In the bright medical lights, his gray eyes were clear. "But you were different. You were kind to your servants even when no one was watching. You listened to petitioners, even the ones who had nothing to offer. You remembered names, small things, things that most rulers never bother with." He paused, gathering strength. "I have served a lot of leaders, Majesty, generals and presidents, kings and warlords. Most of them were not worth protecting. They used people and threw them away. They cared about power, not about the people they were supposed to serve." His voice softened. "You were different. You were worth protecting. so I protected you." The queen did not respond. She could not. In 300 years, no one had ever said anything like this to her. Not her advisors who flattered her for favor. Not her family who saw her as a tool for their own ambitions. Not her priests who the idea of her rather than the person. A human, a creature she had been taught to see as lesser. A man who would live barely another 40 years while she might live another 300. He had seen her, truly seen her, and he had decided she was worth dying for. She reached out and placed one clawed hand over his. "Then stay, Elias Vance." Her voice was thick with emotions that rarely showed. "Not as a liaison, not as a guard, stay as something else." "What else?" She searched for the right word in his language. The human languages were strange, full of concepts that did not have. But there was one word that she had learned, one word that seemed to fit. "A friend." Elias smiled. It was a small expression, just a slight curve of his lips, but she had learned to read it. It meant warmth, acceptance, peace. "I'd like that, Majesty." She corrected. "If we are to be friends, you must use my name." He said it carefully, getting the harmonics as close as a human voice could manage. "I'd like that." Outside the medical bay, the palace hummed with life. Servants moved through the corridors. Nobles gathered in the reception halls. Soldiers patrolled the walls. The ancient machinery of empire turned on as it had for 10,000 years, as it would for 10,000 more. But something had changed. In the stories that spread across the empire, they said that a human had saved the queen. They said he had walked through darkness and fire, had killed a dozen enemies with his bare hands, had stood against an army with nothing but a knife and a pistol. They said he was a shadow, a ghost, a creature of legend. But the queen knew the truth. He was just a man, a quiet man who watched and listened and cared about the right things, a man who had seen something worth protecting and refused to let it die. In the years that followed, Elias stayed at the palace, not as a guard or a liaison, but as something new, something that they had no word for. He advised the queen on matters of security. He trained her new guards in human methods of protection. He walked beside her in public, a small figure next to her tall golden form, and everyone who saw them knew the story. The human who had saved the queen, the friend of the empire. When Elias finally died, many years later, the queen ordered a day of mourning across 1,000 worlds. His body was placed in the Hall of Ancestors, the first non-ever granted that honor. His statue stood beside kings and queens and emperors, a small human figure with kind eyes and strong hands. The inscription read simply, "He protected what was worth protecting." And in the quiet of her private chambers, Queen the Undimmed wept for her friend. She would live another 200 years after his death. She would see empires rise and fall, wars begin and end, the galaxy change in ways that no one could have predicted. But she never forgot the human who had walked through fire for her. She never forgot what he had taught her. That strength was not about power, that loyalty could not be bought or commanded, that sometimes the smallest, softest creatures had the strongest hearts. And that friendship, true friendship, could bridge any gap between species, between worlds, between the stars themselves. The palace stood as it had always stood. The empire endured as it had always endured. And the story of the human and the queen was told for generations, until it became legend, until it became myth, until it became something eternal. A reminder that in all the darkness of the universe, there would always be those who chose to stand in the light. And protected.